The winter night in downtown Los Angeles hung sharp and crystalline, the kind of cold that made breathing hurt, when stars pressed down like diamonds sewn into black velvet. The Grand Meridian Hotel stood gleaming on the corner of Fifth and Hope, all marble columns and polished glass, a monument to the kind of money that looked down on everything below it. Valentina Chen stood outside that hotel in her stained delivery uniform, the left shoulder torn at the seam, her beat-up scooter parked at the curb behind her with a broken headlight that had been broken for 3 months. She wore a helmet under one arm, and in her other hand, she held the hand of a 7-year-old boy named Micah, whose small fingers trembled in the cold. The hotel owner emerged through the brass doors like a man who had never once questioned whether he belonged anywhere. His suit was charcoal, tailored, the kind of tailored that required a name and a waiting list. A Rolex caught the streetlight on his wrist, the metal so gold it hurt to look at. His face was the face of someone who had spent 43 years telling people no, and had never once regretted it. "You cannot bring that trash near my establishment," he said to Valentina, his voice like a closing fist. "You are fired from the shelter. I am on the board. Consider it done." Valentina's lips moved to form words, but nothing came out. Micah's grip on her hand tightened, small bones pressing into her palm. "Did you hear me?" the man continued, stepping toward her. "I have guests arriving from Singapore in 20 minutes. I will not have them see you. Not like this." He gestured at her torn uniform, at her broken scooter, at her worn shoes that had been resold twice by a man in Boyle Heights who charged $5 and never asked questions. Valentina stepped backward. Her heel caught the edge of the sidewalk. For a moment she was falling, and then she caught herself, but the movement was clumsy, desperate, the movement of someone whose body had learned not to expect solid ground. Micah screamed. Not a loud scream. A small, high sound, like something breaking. "Mama," he cried, reaching for her with both hands now. "Mama, I am scared." The hotel owner's face tightened with disgust. He turned and walked back into the hotel without another word, the brass doors swinging shut behind him with a sound like a prison lock turning. Across the street, idling in the shadows between 2 streetlights, a black Mercedes sat with its engine running. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like mirrors. Inside, Lucian sat in the back seat with his shoulders against the leather and his eyes fixed on the street with the intensity of a man studying a map of something he owned. He was 34 years old but looked older in the way that power aged men, like it was a weight they carried in their bones. His suit was black, expensive without trying, the kind of expensive that came from having stopped thinking about money somewhere around age 22. His hair was dark, cut close to his skull. His eyes were the color of storm water, and they did not blink very often. To his right sat Carlo, broad-shouldered, a scar running from his left eye down to his jaw like a pale lightning bolt. To his left sat Nino, younger, hungry-looking, the kind of hungry that had nothing to do with food. "Boss," Carlo said quietly, "we have the meeting with the Castellano family in 15 minutes. The warehouse on." Lucian raised one hand. Just one hand, and Carlo's voice stopped like someone had cut the power. Lucian's eyes were locked on the woman outside the hotel. On the way she had fallen backward. On the way she had caught herself. On the small boy standing beside her, crying, calling her mama with a voice that sounded like it came from somewhere deep in his chest, somewhere ancient and animal and real. The boy was 7 years old. He had light brown skin and dark hair that stuck up in 3 different directions. He wore a coat that had been mended at the seams, and his shoes did not match. One was blue. One was red. They did not match because his mother could not afford shoes that matched, and his mother was the only person in the world who would have cared about that. Except Lucian had once cared. 3 years ago. Before his wife died. Before his son disappeared. The boy's face. The shape of the eyes. The way he held himself, slightly to the left, favoring his right side the way children did when one arm was stronger than the other. The way he said "Mama," the way he reached upward, the way he looked at the woman like she was the only solid thing in a world made of water and wind. Lucian's chest moved. A single breath, drawn in through his nose and held there, held in his lungs like something he could trap if he simply refused to let it go. "Boss?" Nino said, his voice careful, the voice of someone addressing a man who had just gone very still. Lucian raised his hand again, and Nino understood. Silence. Not even breathing, just the soft idling of the Mercedes engine and the sound of the boy crying and the woman saying his name over and over. "Micah, Micah, it is okay, I am here, you are safe, I am here." She knelt down. Her knees hit the cold concrete, and even from across the street, even through the tinted windows, even through the distance and the dark and the winter night, Lucian could see her wince. She wrapped her arms around the boy and pulled him against her chest, and her chin rested on the top of his head, and she closed her eyes like that was the only way to survive this moment, by not looking at it, by feeling it instead. In 15 years of working for Lucian Calabrese, Carlo had never seen him move the way he moved now. Not a flinch. Not even a twitch. Just a man whose body had turned to stone while everything inside him was screaming. "What is her name?" Lucian asked. His voice sounded like it was coming from underwater, like it had traveled a very long distance to reach the surface. "Whose name, boss?" Nino asked, confused. "The woman." "I do not know her name, boss." Lucian watched her for 7 more seconds. 7 seconds was not very long. It was the length of a single breath for most people. But for Lucian, it was long enough to feel 3 years of searching crystallize into a single point of focus, long enough to feel something cold and dangerous and ancient stir in his chest, the same thing that had stirred the night his father was murdered, the same thing that had stirred the night he learned his son was gone. "Find out," he said. The woman stood up, still holding the boy, and she walked toward her scooter. Her legs were shaking slightly. The boy's arms were wrapped around her neck, and he was still crying, still saying "Mama, Mama, Mama," and she was walking toward the scooter with $78 in her pocket and nowhere to go and a job she had just lost and a face that showed every single one of the 24 years she had been alive, and then some, because hardship aged girls faster than time ever could. She settled the boy on the seat of the scooter. She put his helmet on, even though her hands were shaking so badly she could barely fasten the strap. She put on her own helmet. She climbed onto the seat. And then she did not move. For 30 seconds, she did not move. Her hands gripped the handlebars. The scooter did not start. Then her shoulders curved forward, very slightly, and she might have been crying or she might have simply been trying to remember how to breathe, and then she turned the key, and the scooter coughed to life with a sound like something dying, and she pulled out into traffic on 5th Avenue and disappeared into the night. Inside the Mercedes, Lucian's hands were resting on his thighs, palms down. His knuckles were white. The gold rings on his fingers caught the reflected light from the hotel sign, and the light looked like blood. "Carlo," he said. "Yes, boss. I want to know everything. Where she lives. Where she works. Every place she goes. Every person she speaks to. I want her name, her age, her history, every moment of her life since the day she was born. I want to know who gave her those bruises on her wrists and why she flinches when doors close. I want to know if she has family. I want to know if she eats enough. I want to know everything." "Yes, boss," Carlo said. He did not ask why. He had learned, over 15 years, that when Lucian looked at something, it was already decided. And the boy, Lucian continued, his voice dropping so low that Carlo had to lean forward to hear it. "I want to know where that boy came from and who put him in her care and whether anyone is coming to take him away." "Yes, boss. Do not tell the others yet. This stays between us. Do you understand?" "I understand." The Mercedes pulled smoothly away from the curb. Behind it, the Grand Meridian Hotel stood glittering in the winter night, completely unaware that it had just sealed its owner's fate, that a man had been watching, that the universe had noted the cruelty and was already calculating the price. But what Valentina Chen did not know, as she drove through the frozen streets of Los Angeles with a child clinging to her back and $78 remaining in her pocket, was that she had been seen. That somewhere behind her, a man was asking questions. That the most dangerous person in this entire city had just decided that her survival was worth something, and once Lucian Calabrese decided that something was worth something, he would pay any price to keep it alive. The winter wind cut across Wilshire Boulevard like a blade wrapped in ice, and she hunched forward over the handlebars, trying to shield Micah from the worst of it, trying to figure out where they could go at 9 o'clock at night when she had just been fired from the only job that had given her a place to sleep, a warm meal, a reason to wake up in the morning. Micah's arms tightened around her neck. His small face pressed against her shoulder. "Where are we going, Mama?" he asked, his voice small and tired and trusting in a way that broke something open in her chest. Valentina did not know. She had nowhere to go. She had no one to call. She had nothing except the $78 in her pocket and a child who had started calling her Mama 3 months ago, and she was terrified, absolutely terrified, that she was going to fail him the way everyone had failed her. But she straightened her shoulders. She drove faster. And in the darkness behind her, the black Mercedes followed at a distance, and inside it, a man who had built an empire on vengeance was asking questions that were going to change everything. The winter wind tore through the empty streets of East Los Angeles like a blade wrapped in ice, and Valentina Chen hunched forward over the handlebars of her beat-up scooter, trying to shield the small body clinging to her back from the worst of it. Micah's arms tightened around her neck. His small face pressed against her shoulder, his breath warm against the cold fabric of her delivery uniform. "Where are we going, Mama?" he asked, his voice small and tired and trusting in a way that broke something open in her chest. Valentina did not know. She had nowhere to go. She had no one to call. Her fingers trembled on the handlebars as the rain began to fall, mixing with the sweat on her palms, and she was terrified, absolutely terrified, that she was going to fail him the way everyone had failed her. But she straightened her shoulders. She drove faster through the darkness. 3 hours earlier, the hotel manager had called her into his office. His name was Derek, and he had never looked at her directly in the 14 months she had worked there. He sat behind his desk, a massive piece of mahogany that cost more than 3 months of her rent, and he did not invite her to sit. "We're letting you go," he said, not looking up from his computer screen. Valentina's hands moved to her sides. She had known something was wrong the moment he'd called her away from cleaning the lobby. "Why?" "I have not missed a shift." "I have never?" "A guest complained that you were loitering in the hallway outside their room." His voice was flat, administrative, the way someone speaks about replacing a broken light bulb. "We cannot have staff making guests uncomfortable." She wanted to tell him the truth. She wanted to explain that she had been taking a 30-second break, that her feet were bleeding from the new shoes she could not afford to replace, that she was only standing in that hallway because her body was screaming and she needed one moment to breathe. But she had learned long ago that the truth did not matter to people like Derek. "I need this job," she said instead. Her voice came out small, fractured like glass. "Please. I have nowhere else. Security will escort you out. You will not be paid for today. Your final check will be mailed." He turned his chair slightly away from her. "You can go now." The escort was a man named Quinn, muscular and bored, who walked 3 paces behind her as she gathered her things from the small employee locker in the basement. She had kept a change of clothes there, the only clean set she owned besides the uniform. She folded them slowly, taking her time, trying to delay the moment when she would have to step back out into the world with nowhere to go. Quinn did not speak. His footsteps echoed on the concrete floor, measured and unhurried and absolutely final. The lobby of the Grandview Hotel was empty except for a young woman in a business suit checking in at the front desk. Valentina walked past her, head down, aware of being seen and invisible at the same time. The woman did not glance in her direction. To her, Valentina was furniture, a detail of the lobby that did not merit attention. The December cold hit her like a slap when she stepped outside. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sun was already sinking toward the horizon, and she stood on the sidewalk in front of the hotel with a plastic bag containing everything she owned in the world and $78 remaining in her pocket. She had to get to the shelter before 5 o'clock. Micah was waiting. The ride across Los Angeles took 45 minutes. Her scooter sputtered and coughed as she navigated the traffic, her wet hands slipping on the handlebars. The rain was coming harder now, and her delivery uniform was soaked through to her skin. She could not feel her fingers. She could not feel her toes. What she could feel was the small, precise mathematics of her poverty running through her mind like a calculation of slow death. Rent was due in 4 days. $850. She had 78. Her tuition payment was due in 2 weeks. $4,200. She had 78. Groceries to feed herself and Micah through the month. She had 78. The numbers would not change, no matter how many times she multiplied them or subtracted them or rearranged them in her exhausted mind. They formed a wall with no door, a problem with no solution, a life that was ending in slow motion. The Los Angeles Children's Crisis Shelter sat on a quiet street in Boyle Heights, a converted warehouse that had been painted a cheerful blue that was now peeling and faded. Inside, it smelled like industrial soup and wet wool and something underneath that might have been hope, if hope had a smell. Mrs. Santos was at the front desk, 47 years old with grey threading through her black hair and eyes that had seen too much. She looked up when Valentina walked in, shaking rain from her hair, leaving a small puddle on the linoleum floor. "You are early," Mrs. Santos said, but her face changed when she looked more carefully. "What happened?" "I lost my job," Valentina said. The words were simple, factual, and they felt like a confession of failure. "The hotel. They let me go today." Mrs. Santos stood up from her desk. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but there was something solid about her, something anchored. "Valentina. I am so sorry. Come. You need to sit. You need something warm." "Micah," Valentina said. "Is he?" "In the playroom. He has been waiting for you since 2 o'clock. Mrs. Santos put a hand on her shoulder, and the simple gesture of kindness nearly broke her completely. "Come." The playroom was crowded with children. There were 8 of them, ranging from 4 years old to 13, and they were scattered across the space with the particular isolation that marked children in shelters, near each other but not truly together, each existing in their own small grief. Micah sat in the corner with a box of crayons, drawing on a piece of white paper. When he looked up and saw her, his entire face transformed. He was 7 years old. He had been at the shelter for 6 months. No one had come to claim him. No mother, no father, no relative who wanted him enough to fill out the paperwork. He was small for his age, with dark hair and eyes that held more knowledge than a child should carry. When he moved carefully, as if he expected to be hit. He stood up slowly and walked to her, and then he wrapped his thin arms around her waist and pressed his face against her stomach. "You came," he said, his voice muffled. "You always come." Valentina's hand moved to his hair, stroking it gently. She could feel his shoulder blades through his thin shirt, small and sharp like bird wings. "Of course I came. I always come." "I made you a picture," he said, pulling back just enough to look at her. He held up the drawing. It showed 3 figures, a small one in the middle with his arms extended toward 2 larger ones on either side. One was colored in blue crayon. One was colored in red. Above them, a yellow sun. "This is you, and this is me, and this is..." He hesitated. He did not finish the sentence. "This is beautiful," Valentina said. She took the drawing from his small hands and looked at it. The colors were bright against the white paper, hopeful in a way that made her heart break. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket, next to the $78 that would not stretch far enough. Mrs. Santos appeared in the doorway with 2 bowls of soup. The smell of it was overwhelming, something with beans and vegetables and salt, something that tasted like warmth. She set the bowls on a small table in the corner, and Valentina and Micah sat down together. They shared a spoon. This was normal now. This was how they had eaten together for 3 months. Micah ate slowly, making the soup last as long as possible. He had learned, like all shelter children learn, that eating slowly meant the meal continued longer, meant more time before the next absence began. "Can you stay tonight?" he asked. His eyes were fixed on his bowl. He did not look at her when he asked, as if the answer would hurt less if he was not looking at her face. "The shelter does not allow," Valentina began. "I know," Micah said quietly. "But you could sleep in the hallway. Or the lobby. Or the bathroom. I would know you were here." The knife twisted in her chest. "Not tonight, sweetheart. But tomorrow. Tomorrow I will come back." She reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers were small and cold and sticky with soup. "I will always come back." It was a promise she had no right to make. At 9 o'clock, she left the shelter and rode her scooter through the rain-soaked streets. Micah watched from the window as she drove away, his small face pressed against the glass, his hand raised but not waving. Just there. Witnessing her departure. She drove with no destination. She could not go home to her studio apartment in East LA, because her landlord had left a notice on her door 2 weeks ago, a yellow paper stating that rent was due or she would be evicted. The money she had been saving carefully, in small amounts, had gone to pay for Micah's winter coat. Winter coats cost money. Children needed them. The streets of Los Angeles at night were a map of places where she did not belong. Hotels with lobbies where security would follow her. Restaurants where the owner would ask her to leave. Bus stations filled with other people who were also nowhere, also trapped, also running out of time. She turned the scooter down a side street she did not recognize, and then another, and the rain fell harder and the wind cut through her uniform and she realized that she was genuinely, completely alone in a way she had never been before. The $78 in her pocket was not money. It was a countdown. It was the measure of her remaining days. And somewhere in the darkness behind her, a black Mercedes moved through the rain at a measured distance, and inside it, a man with dark eyes and silver threading through his hair sat in the back seat and asked his driver a single question. Who was the woman who cleaned the Grand View Hotel lobby? His driver's name was Carlo, and he had worked for Lucian Calabrese for 17 years. He did not ask why the boss wanted to know. He simply reached for his phone and began making calls, the way he had made 1,000 other calls before, calls that always resulted in information, always resulted in answers, always resulted in whatever Lucian Calabrese wanted to find. What none of them knew, not Valentina, not Micah, not even the man asking the question in the darkness, was that the universe had been watching. That every cruelty, every dismissal, every time someone had closed their hand against hers, had been noted. Recorded. Calculated. The rain fell on the city and the streets grew darker and the numbers in Valentina's pocket remained fixed at 78 while the cost of staying alive continued to rise, and the debt she owed to survival continued to compound, and somewhere in the cold, a man was already asking how much mercy was worth and whether he could afford to pay the price. The underground poker room sat 7 stories below downtown Los Angeles, buried beneath a warehouse that had been abandoned since 1987. Green felt tables stretched across the concrete floor like islands in an ocean of smoke, and the smoke was so thick you could taste it on your tongue, cigar ash and money and the particular scent of men who had stopped believing in mercy a long time ago. Stacks of cash dominated the center table. $200,000 visible, more in chips. 6 armed guards stood motionless at the perimeter, weapons concealed but present, the way danger is always present in a room where Lucian Calabrese sits at the head of the table and decides which men keep their fortunes and which men lose everything. He was 34 years old but carried the weight of someone who had lived several lifetimes. Dark hair with silver threading through at the temples, shoulders broad enough to fill the custom-tailored suit that cost more than Valentina Chen would earn in 3 years. His face was a map of controlled cruelty, sharp cheekbones, a scar running from his left eye to his jaw like a blade someone had drawn across his skin and forgotten to finish. The scar didn't disfigure him. It completed him. It told the story of a man who had survived things that killed other people. He did not smile at the poker table. Men across from him pushed their money forward, and he collected it the way a glacier collects snow, without passion, without haste, without anything that resembled human feeling. Carlo approached from the shadows. 17 years working for Lucian Calabrese had taught Carlo never to speak unless invited, so his silence had weight. Lucian felt it and glanced up. Carlo was 52, built like someone who had broken things professionally, grey threading his dark beard, eyes that had seen interrogations and disappearances. He leaned close to his boss and whispered information about the monthly take, restaurants, nightclubs, protection payments. The usual machinery of empire. Lucian waved him off. The distraction had started 2 days ago outside the Grand Meridian Hotel. A girl, bleeding, defending a child who was not hers. A boy with familiar eyes. When you have spent 3 years searching for something, 3 years spending millions on private investigators and informants and bribes that never yielded results, you learn to recognize the shape of hope even when it arrives looking like a street fight. After the poker room closed at dawn, after the men had lost their fortunes and surrendered to the arithmetic of chance, Lucian had given Carlo a single order. The woman who cleaned the lobby of the Grand Meridian Hotel. I want her name. I want her address. I want to know every place she has worked and every person who knows her. Carlo had made phone calls. By afternoon, he had delivered a file. Valentina Chen, 24 years old, works delivery, attends nursing school at night, volunteers at St. Catherine's Children's Shelter on Sunday afternoons. And attached to her file was a photograph pulled from the hotel's security footage. She wore a maid uniform. Her hair was pulled back. Her face showed the particular exhaustion of someone running on empty. But what caught Lucian's attention was not the girl. It was the small figure visible in the corner of the frame behind her. A child. 7 years old. With dark hair and eyes that matched his own. The boy's name was Micah. Micah had been 4 years old when he vanished 3 years ago from a guarded property in Bel Air. Rival family had taken him. Lucian had spent $2 million and 36 months searching. Every lead had gone cold. Every informant had come back empty. He had begun to accept what every man in his position eventually accepts, that some things cannot be recovered, that some losses are permanent, that vengeance for a lost child is just an abstraction because the child stays lost. But on the day before Valentina Chen stumbled bleeding into the underground poker room, Lucian sat in the dim safe house where he had been analyzing security footage frame by frame for 72 consecutive hours, and Carlo said, "Boss, is that?" and Lucian's hands clenched into fists because yes, it was his son. Breathing. Alive. Speaking. Living with a girl who did not know who she was protecting. That same night, at 11 o'clock, Valentina finished her last delivery. A 3-mile drive on a scooter with a faulty engine, a restaurant order that had taken 45 minutes to prepare, a couple who handed her $3 on a $60 bill and closed the door without making eye contact. The $3 brought her total daily earnings to $81. Her total remaining dollars in the world. She needed $900 for rent, $4,200 for tuition, and there were 10 days left in the month. The arithmetic of this was simple and cruel and had no solutions. She had been performing the same calculation for 7 months while working 3 jobs and pretending that everything was manageable and that her body would not eventually break under the weight of survival. She drove to St. Catherine's Children's Shelter to drop off supplies she had purchased with money she did not have. Crayons, notebooks, a box of granola bars she had bought at discount because the expiration date was 1 week away. Small things. Micah's things. The boy appeared at the shelter with no history, no documents, and a trauma so complete that he would not speak to anyone except Valentina. She had sat beside him for 3 months without pushing, just present, just there, and eventually he had used her as the foundation for something that might become healing. As she parked her scooter, a figure stepped from the shadows between 2 buildings. Tyler Brennan. 6'2", 200 pounds, the kind of handsome that looked good from a distance and revealed itself as cruelty when you moved closer. He wore an expensive coat. His hair was styled. He looked like someone who had never wanted for anything. "I told you we needed to talk," he said. Valentina's stomach contracted. She had reported him 14 times. 14 separate reports. The police had nodded and taken notes and done nothing because Tyler's brother was a detective and his father owned a real estate company that donated to the police union, and the code of silence ran through the department like a virus. She backed away. "I told you. You think you can ignore me?" He grabbed her arm. His fingers dug into muscle. "You are my girl, Val. You do not get to make decisions about whether we talk." She pulled hard, felt his grip slip, and ran. 3 blocks of running through frozen streets, her breath white in the darkness, her scooter left behind without a thought because leaving a scooter was better than the weight of his hands on her body. Behind her, his footsteps. Patient. Unhurried. The footsteps of a man accustomed to women who stopped running. She stumbled. Her hands hit frozen pavement. Skin tore. Blood painted the concrete. He caught her. His boot connected with her ribs. The impact drove the air from her lungs. She gasped. He grabbed her hair and slammed her head against a brick wall, and the world became fractured light and pain without location. Blood ran from her temple. Her vision blurred at the edges. She needed him. It was instinct, not strategy. He grunted and his grip loosened and she pulled free and ran blindly without knowing where the streets led, just away, just anywhere that was not beneath his hands. She ran for 8 city blocks with her ribs screaming and her head spinning and no destination in her mind except distance. A door appeared. She did not know what building it belonged to. She simply pulled it open and stumbled through. Into silence. Into a room where 6 armed men stood motionless and green felt tables held the weight of $200,000 and cigar smoke hung in the air like a visible presence. The guards raised weapons in unison. Their movements had the coordination of men who had practiced this response countless times. Valentina collapsed to her knees. Her uniform was torn. Blood ran down her face. One eye was swelling shut. Handprint bruises were already darkening on her throat where his fingers had pressed. The room went absolutely still. Every eye turned to the man at the head of the table. Lucian Calabrese stared at the girl bleeding on his floor. Then his gaze shifted past her, to the figure that had followed her through the door. A small boy. 7 years old. Dark hair. Familiar eyes. Micah. The child froze in the doorway. His gaze locked on the man at the table. Recognition moved across his face, not the immediate recognition of a child who remembered a parent, but something deeper, something in the body's memory, something that knew this man before the mind could form the word. Lucian stood slowly. Every motion was controlled. Every motion was deliberate. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and solid like an oath being carved into stone. "Clear the room." Carlo stepped forward. "Boss." "Now." They left in silence. The guards, the men in suits who had been losing fortunes, even Nino who had stood beside Lucian for 19 years. The door closed. The footsteps faded. It was just the 3 of them in the underground room beneath the city. Just Lucian and Valentina bleeding on the floor and the small boy who had begun calling another woman Mama. Lucian moved toward them, and if his men could have seen him, they would not have recognized him. He moved with something that resembled gentleness. He knelt beside Valentina, careful not to touch her, and his voice when he spoke was fractured like glass. "You are hurt." She flinched away. "I am sorry. I did not mean, I was running, I will leave." "Mama," Micah said. He ran to Valentina despite the blood, despite the strangeness of this man kneeling beside her. He wrapped his small arms around her neck, and Valentina pulled him close despite the pain that moved through her ribs with every breath. "I am okay, baby," she whispered. She looked at the man. His eyes were locked on the child. His hands trembled. "Please do not hurt him," Valentina said. Lucian's voice cracked when he answered. "Hurt him? I have been searching for him for 3 years." The sentence hung in the air like a blade suspended between them. Valentina processed the meaning. The implication. The way this man was looking at her son, and he was her son, in the way that matters, in the way that transcends blood, like he was reconstructing his entire world from a single image. "You are his father," she said. Lucian nodded once. It was the smallest movement possible. A man confirming something that had already destroyed him. "He appeared at the shelter 6 months ago," Valentina continued. Her voice was barely a whisper. "No name. No records. He would not speak to anyone but me. I have been—" She stopped. "I did not know." "What is your name?" Lucian asked. "Valentina Chen." He called for Carlo and Nino. They returned within seconds, as if they had been waiting directly outside, as if they had known their presence would be needed. "Get a doctor," Lucian said. "Now. And find out everything about the man who did this to her." Valentina protested. "I cannot pay for a doctor. I have $81. That is all I have." Lucian looked at her with something in his eyes that resembled breaking glass and lightning simultaneously. "You protected my son. You will never pay for anything again." The morning light cut through the safe house windows like a blade wrapped in ice. Valentina had not slept. She sat on the edge of the bed watching Micah breathe, watching his small chest rise and fall, her hand trembling above his hair but not quite touching him. 48 hours remained. Not 48 hours and some minutes. Exactly 48 hours until midnight on day 12, until the deadline Tyler Brennan had screamed through the door became real, became final, became the moment everything collapsed. Her phone sat on the nightstand. Dead. She had turned it off after the third call from her nursing school dean, after the fifth message from former classmates asking if she was really a kidnapper, after the screenshots of her own face circulated across social media with comments like "This woman is a criminal" and "How could she steal a child?" Cordelia Blackwood had done her work perfectly. The morning show broadcast had aired at 7 o'clock. Valentina watched it from this room, on the television that Carlo had set up, and she watched her own destruction happen in real time. Cordelia sat in a chair that probably cost more than Valentina earned in a year, her blonde hair styled like a weapon, her face arranged in the expression of a concerned citizen. "We have a responsibility," Cordelia said, her voice steady and reasonable and absolutely lethal, "to report when a child goes missing from one of our community's most respected families." The photo appeared on screen. Valentina and Micah at the park. They were feeding pigeons. Micah was laughing. Cordelia had obtained it somehow. Tyler must have given it to her, or one of the other men had taken it without Valentina knowing. Either way, there it was. Evidence. Proof of something that was not a crime being presented as something that was. "Authorities are investigating possible kidnapping for ransom," Cordelia continued. "The child disappeared 3 years ago. The woman in this photograph has been seen with him repeatedly. A demand for $300,000 has been made to the family. All of it true. All of it arranged to be believed as evil." Valentina turned off the television. She could not watch anymore. By evening, the city had turned against her. The comments online had metastasized. News outlets were calling for information. A missing child, they said. A ransom demand, they said. A criminal, they said. Her face everywhere. Her name repeated as though it belonged to someone dangerous. She counted her money again at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. $81. The addition of $3 from a forgotten pocket in her jacket. $81 and no way to make more because no one would hire the woman on television accused of stealing a child. No way to escape because every exit from the city would have her face at checkpoints now. No way to save Micah because there was no amount of money she could gather that would be enough to satisfy people who had already decided she was guilty. The bang on the door came at 8:15 in the evening. Not a knock. A bang. The sound of something heavy hitting wood. Valentina's heart stopped entirely. She heard Lucian's guards move outside, heard their voices lowered and urgent. She picked up Micah, who had been sleeping, and held him close. The bang came again. Louder. "This is the Los Angeles Police Department. Open this door." 6 men. Valentina saw them when Carlo cracked the door open. 6 men in police uniforms, but their eyes held the flatness of corruption. She recognized 2 of them from Tyler's apartment, from the nights he had bragged about how he could do anything because he had friends in uniform. Tyler stood behind them, his face flushed with rage and something else, something like desperation. "Valentina," he screamed through the crack in the door. "Open this door. You have until midnight tomorrow." Midnight. That is 24 hours. Lucian's guards formed a wall that these men could not cross. Carlo stood motionless, one hand visible, the other at his side. Nino appeared from the kitchen, then 2 more men Valentina did not know. They did not draw weapons. They did not need to. The message was clear: you will not enter. Tyler's voice cracked. "She has 1 day. 1 day and then Cordelia releases everything. She has fabricated evidence. She has paid witnesses. You will go to prison, Val. Prison. And the boy will be taken away and you will never see him again." Valentina could hear every word. Each one landed like a fist. "Leave," Carlo said. His voice was deeper than the ocean and twice as final. "You cannot keep me from her. She is facing federal charges. She is a criminal." "Leave," Nino repeated, and this time the officers understood. Whatever leverage Tyler thought he had dissolved the moment they saw the organization arrayed against them. These were men who had made their peace with corruption, but only small corruption, neighborhood corruption, corruption that did not interfere with the Calabrese family. They left. Tyler's screams continued from the hallway, then faded as they descended the stairs. Valentina held Micah through the night. She did not sleep. She could not sleep. At 2 in the morning, she realized she could not do this anymore. The weight of it. The impossible mathematics of it. $300,000 in 24 hours. Police looking for her. The entire city believing she was a monster. Micah would be better off without her. He would be placed with someone safe, someone normal, someone who did not bring destruction to everything she touched. She waited until the guards changed shift at 4 in the morning. She slipped past Carlo, who was checking the back entrance. She walked out into a night so cold it felt like punishment. The frozen Los Angeles River lay 3 blocks away. She had seen it once, years ago, when she had been driving for delivery and taken a wrong turn. The water had looked black and still and permanent. The bridge was empty at 4 in the morning. No cars. No people. Just the frost coating the metal railing and the city lights reflecting off ice below. Valentina walked to the center point. The wind cut through her jacket like it was not there. Her breath came out in clouds that disappeared into darkness. $81. That was her value. That was what she had managed to accumulate in a lifetime of working. Tyler would never stop. Neither would Cordelia. They had invested too much rage into destroying her. And Lucian, kind Lucian, who had shown her gentleness for the first time since her mother died, would eventually have to choose between helping a woman with nothing and protecting his empire. The railing was cold under her palms. Ice crystals pricked her skin. She looked down. A small sound came from behind her. Not a footstep. A breath. A child's breath, shaky and frightened. Valentina turned. Micah stood there in his pajamas, his feet bare on the frozen ground, holding a piece of paper. It was the drawing he had made weeks ago, the family portrait with 3 figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Valentina in the middle. Micah on one side. And on the other side, a figure he had drawn in recent days, after Lucian had first appeared. A tall man with dark hair and a scar. Micah did not speak. He never did. He simply held up the picture. Valentina's breath caught somewhere between her ribs. Behind Micah, Lucian. He emerged from the darkness like something carved from it. He wore a dark coat that probably cost more than a used car. His hands were bare, exposed to the cold without flinching. He looked at her with eyes that held no judgment, only understanding. He did not speak either. He simply watched. And Valentina understood that he was letting her choose. Not saving her. Not deciding for her. Offering her the chance to step back from the railing and live, or to take the step she was considering. Trusting her. After everything she had done wrong, everything she had failed at, everything she had lost, he trusted her to choose life. She stepped back. Lucian crossed the bridge in 3 strides and pulled her close. She fell into him like a person falling into an answer. Micah wrapped around both of them, his drawing crushed between their bodies. At 6:47 in the morning on day 12, Lucian Calabrese gave an order that would reshape the city. "Bring everyone," he said to Carlo and Nino. "Every man. Every connection. Every favor owed to me." 12 men in black moved through the pre-dawn darkness like ghosts. They wore tactical gear under designer coats. They carried weapons that had names in languages most people did not speak. They moved with the precision of men who had trained for this their entire lives. Target 1, Tyler Brennan's apartment building on 7th and Main. The breach came at 6:47 and 30 seconds. The door came off its hinges before Tyler's eyes were fully open. He jerked awake to the sight of Nino's gun at his forehead, the barrel so close Tyler could see the darkness inside it. "Do not move," Nino said. Tyler's mouth opened. No sound came out. Lucian entered behind the breach team. He was still wearing the dark coat. He was still calm. He looked at Tyler the way a man might look at an insect he was deciding whether to crush. "You put your hands on her," Lucian said. I do not know who." "You put your hands on someone under my protection." "Multiple times. In front of witnesses. With intent to cause serious injury." Tyler's face went white. Not pale. White. The color of a man whose entire understanding of how he might survive the next 5 minutes evaporated completely. Cordelia made me, she wanted, I would never have." "I know," Lucian said. He nodded at Carlo. "You are going to tell us everything." Tyler talked for 40 minutes. The confession poured out of him like bleeding. He named dates. He named other officers involved. He named Cordelia by title and intention and the specific financial amounts she had paid to witnesses. He explained the scheme in detail, how to destroy Valentina's credibility, how to make sure she would be arrested, how to ensure she would never be believed again even if she had evidence of her own. All of it recorded. Video and audio. Pristine documentation of 7 months of stalking, for separate assaults, bribery of 3 police officers, and conspiracy to commit extortion. "Please," Tyler begged when he finished. His voice had become something that barely qualified as human speech. "Please, I will leave the city. You will never see me again. I will disappear. Lucian, you are right. I will never see you again." Nino dragged him toward the door. Tyler's screams echoed down the hallway. Within minutes, he was in the back of an unmarked car, and the car was moving toward federal field offices downtown, and FBI agents were being informed that they had a gift, a fully confessed predator, all the evidence they would need, all the corruption they could prosecute. Target 2, Cordelia Blackwood at her television studio. She was in the control room at 11:30 in the morning. Hair perfect. Makeup flawless. She was reviewing the noon broadcast, the one where she would reveal Valentina Chen to the world as a criminal, as a kidnapper, as a monster. This was her masterpiece. This was her revenge. The control room doors opened. Lucian walked in. His men had already secured every exit, every hallway, every camera. They had done it so cleanly that none of the studio staff even understood what was happening until it was finished. Cordelia turned. Her smile faltered. "Mr. Calabrese, I do not believe we have met." "We have not. But you made a mistake involving yourself with someone my son loves." "Your son?" Confusion crossed her face. Then understanding. Then panic she could not hide. The kidnapped child? You mean that girl? Lucian held up his phone. He played Tyler's confession video. All 40 minutes of it. Tyler on screen, describing Cordelia's plan, her financing of false witnesses, her specific instructions on how to fabricate evidence, his explanation that Cordelia had become obsessed with revenge against Valentina for daring to refuse Tyler's affections, for daring to walk away from a man she had been sleeping with. Cordelia's face drained of color. She tried to speak. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. That video is inadmissible, she whispered finally. You cannot use it in court. It was obtained illegally. I am not going to court, Lucian said. He nodded to Carlo. At exactly noon, the broadcast began. Cordelia's noon show. Her big reveal. But instead of her carefully prepared segment destroying Valentina Chen, every screen in Los Angeles showed Tyler's complete confession. Every monitor, every network feed, every camera automatically switched to the video. Then the next piece, FBI raid footage. Agents in tactical gear breaching Cordelia's mansion at 11:45 that morning. Finding the fabricated evidence in her private office safe. Finding the payment records. Finding the list of witnesses she had paid. Live television. The news anchors scrambled. We are receiving reports that our station owner, Cordelia Blackwood, is being arrested by federal agents. We are trying to get more information. Cordelia watched from the studio, surrounded by Lucian's men, as her entire world collapsed on every screen. Her board of directors released a statement within minutes, denouncing her. The senators who had called her by her first name suddenly had no knowledge of her at all. Her oldest friends cancelled meetings. Her charity board dissolved. Within 3 hours, her assets were frozen. Within 5, federal charges were filed. 40 years minimum. Conspiracy, fraud, bribery, obstruction of justice, fabricating evidence, racketeering. The confession video went viral at 12:04 in the afternoon. By 1 o'clock, it had been shared 3 million times. By evening, every major news outlet in the country had run the story. Cordelia Blackwood, beloved television personality, arrested on live television, exposed as a liar and a manipulator and a woman who had attempted to destroy an innocent person out of pure spite. She was led from her mansion in handcuffs. Her own station broadcast it live. Their top story. Their greatest scandal. The woman who had signed their paychecks, who had built the station, revealed as corrupt, criminal, destroyable. Tyler, meanwhile, was processed through federal holding. His mugshot appeared online within hours. Other inmates recognized him. The guards looked away when he was cornered in the holding cell. By the time he reached county jail, he was already famous, the man exposed on live television, the man who had stalked a woman for 7 months, the man whose face was now synonymous with predation. Justice was not death. Death would have been too quick, too easy, too merciful. Justice was systematic destruction. Justice was being known. Justice was watching everything you built collapse because of who you really were. And in a safe house across the city, Valentina Chen held her son and watched it all happen on a television screen, and she understood for the first time that she was not invisible anymore. She was seen. She was believed. She was protected. The bruises on her throat would fade. The scars would heal. But the thing that had changed could never be reversed. She had been chosen. By a man who built empires, who commanded loyalty, who could have chosen anyone in the world. He had chosen her. 3 weeks had passed since the news broke. Valentina sat in Lucian's apartment on the 42nd floor, the city sprawling beneath her like something she had never quite believed was real. She held the remote control in her hand and watched the screen. The courthouse steps. Tyler Brennan's mugshot frozen in time. His face hollowed out, aged 10 years in 3 weeks, his eyes carrying the look of a man who understood, finally, that the world had seen him. Guilty on all counts. 40 years minimum. Eligible for parole in 30 if the parole board showed mercy, which they would not, because mercy required forgetting, and the internet never forgets. The newscast shifted. Cordelia Blackwood, the woman whose voice had dominated evening television for 18 years, led from her mansion in handcuffs. She had worn a cream-colored suit as if style could purchase innocence. It could not. Her own station ran the footage on loop. Their top anchor, the same woman who had slandered Valentina's name across the airwaves, now delivered the news of Cordelia's arrest with a voice wrapped in vindication. Cordelia faced 14 federal counts. Wire fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. Her lawyers had abandoned her when they examined the evidence. She had attempted to defend herself in court and failed spectacularly. 40 years. No parole possibility. The judge's voice, delivered through the television speakers, sounded like a gavel striking marble. 3 corrupt police officers were fired. 2 faced criminal charges for falsifying reports, for accepting bribes from Tyler Brennan in exchange for silence. The 3rd had already fled the state. Valentina's name was cleared. Completely. Every major news outlet that had reported her as unstable, as unreliable, as potentially fabricating the stalking and assault, issued public apologies. The newspaper that had run the headline "A Nursing Student's Credibility in Question" published a retraction with an apology that took up the entire front page. The local news station that had interviewed Cordelia Blackwood, who had made Valentina sound like a liar, now issued a statement acknowledging that they had failed to verify their sources' claims. Accountability arrived late, but it arrived. A phone call came that afternoon. The dean of the nursing program, a woman named Margaret Summers, called personally to apologize. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Ms. Chen, I called to tell you that we have reviewed your file. The accusations against you were unfounded and we failed you when you needed institutional support. We would like to offer you a full scholarship to complete your degree. The value is $47,000. I hope you will accept it and allow us to make this right." Valentina had held the phone, unable to speak. That evening, Micah climbed into her lap. He was 7 years old now, no longer the silent boy who spoke only in drawings. His vocabulary had expanded. His laughter filled the apartment. He was thriving. A child, given safety, bloomed like something that had been waiting underground for years. "Mama, are the bad people gone?" he asked, his small voice carrying a question that belonged to no 7-year-old. She nodded, unable to form words. She held him against her chest and felt his heartbeat, steady and strong, and understood that she was no longer protecting him alone. The burden had been shared now. The responsibility of keeping him safe was no longer entirely hers. 3 days later, Lucian asked to speak with her privately. They stood in his office. The room where she had first learned his name, where she had wept, where his men had watched with shock as their boss showed gentleness to a stranger. He stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, and for a moment he looked uncertain in a way that did not suit him. Carlo and Nino would not have recognized this version of their boss. The man who commanded empires seemed, in this moment, afraid. "Micah asks for you every morning," Lucian said, his voice steady but something moving beneath it like current beneath calm water. "He calls you Mama. He has not stopped drawing pictures of our family." Valentina said nothing. She waited. "What world do you think you belong to?" Lucian turned to face her. "The one where you survive on $81? Where you deliver food through frozen streets and receive nothing? Or the one where someone protects you? I am a delivery girl with a beat-up scooter. You are the woman who protected my son when you had nothing. You are the woman who gave him back his voice. You chose to live on a bridge when every reason to die was standing beside you." He stepped closer. "You are everything." He pulled a document from his desk. Adoption papers for Micah. Guardianship forms. A space for a second guardian's signature. "I am asking you to be his mother," Lucian said. "Legally. Permanently." Valentina took the papers with hands that trembled. The weight of them was nothing, but the meaning was everything. "And what about us?" Lucian was quiet for a long moment. I am asking you to trust me. To let me show you that not every man will hurt you. To give us time. 1 month later, Valentina had finished her nursing degree. The full scholarship covered tuition, books, certification. She moved into Lucian's home, into the space he had prepared for her. Separate rooms. Careful. Slow. He was learning what she needed, and she was learning that there existed men who could learn. Micah thrived. He spoke in full sentences. He laughed constantly. The silence that had wrapped around him had lifted. One evening, the three of them sat at the dinner table with Carlo and Nino joining them. Micah showed everyone a new drawing. This time, he had added their family, but with Carlo and Nino on the edges. He had drawn them carefully, their suits rendered in black crayon, their faces serious but present. "This is everyone," Micah said. No one spoke for a moment. Nino looked away. Carlo's jaw tightened. Lucian reached out and touched his son's hand. After dinner, Valentina and Lucian stood on the balcony overlooking Los Angeles. The city that had tried to crush her. The city that had marked her invisible. The city was glittering below them, indifferent and magnificent. "You never told me what you will do now," Lucian said. "You have your degree." "I was thinking about working with children," Valentina said. "At-risk kids who need someone. Kids whose families are broken. Kids who need to know that not everything dies in the dark." Lucian smiled. "Of course you were." Their hands were close on the railing. Not quite touching. "Not yet." "Thank you," Valentina said. "For everything." "You gave me my son back," Lucian replied. "Thank you will never be enough." Micah appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the light from inside. He watched them for a moment, then smiled and disappeared. 6 months later, Valentina worked at a children's center that bore no name on its paperwork that would connect it to Lucian. 12 children attended. At risk. Broken. Lost. She arrived in a car now, reliable and real. Her beat-up scooter sat in Lucian's garage, a reminder of what had been and what had changed. That evening, Micah ran to her when she returned. "Mama." She lifted him and spun him. Lucian stood in the kitchen, cooking dinner. He had learned to cook for Micah. For her. He had learned that family required more than money or power. It required presence. At bedtime, she read to Micah. Tucked him in. He held the original drawing, the one from the shelter, now framed on his wall. A family. Her family. "Mama, are you happy?" Micah asked. "So happy, baby," she whispered. "Papa is happy too. I can tell." After Micah slept, Lucian and Valentina returned to the balcony. Their place. 6 months of conversations. Of slow trust. Of healing that moved like dawn, imperceptible until suddenly the entire sky had changed. Lucian took her hand. The first time fully. Intentionally. "I never thought I could have this," he said. "After my father died, I thought family was just another weakness someone could exploit. And now? Now I know it is the only strength that matters." Valentina looked at their joined hands. 6 months ago she had possessed $78 and bruises on her throat. Now she held a future. She had a son. She had purpose. She had a man who had rebuilt her world and asked for nothing but time. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Her voice came through the darkness, steady and clear. "People ask me how my life changed so completely. They want to know the secret. But there is no secret. There was just a choice. On a frozen bridge, I chose to live. In his office, I chose to trust. Every day since, I have chosen to believe that the past does not define the future. That the worst night can lead to the best morning. That sometimes the most dangerous man in the city is exactly who you need to feel safe." The three of them stood silhouetted on the balcony, the drawing held in Micah's small hands, Los Angeles glittering beneath them. Lucian turned to Valentina and spoke the truth he had learned. Every day we choose between fear and trust, between closing ourselves off and opening our hearts. You taught me which choice matters. If this story moved you, drop a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that remind us that even in the darkest moments, we are never truly alone. What choice will you make today? Tell us in the comments. Tyler Brennan. 40 years. Eligible for parole in 30. Cordelia Blackwood. 40 years. No parole. 3 corrupt officers. Fired and facing charges. Valentina Chen. Registered nurse. Children's advocate. Mother. Micah Calabrese. Age 8. Thriving. Surrounded by family.